Can House and Senate negotiators get past their sizable differences in how they plan to expand Medicaid? What are those differences, and how might they impact Mississippi stakeholders? We'll get some analysis of the two plans in play and hear from one of the people who hope to get coverage in a final deal. Also, felony suffrage appears to be going nowhere in the legislative session, but momentum suggests that lawmakers will take up the issue again next year. And a new campaign finance law targets a loophole enjoyed by your public service commissioners. That's all ahead this Sunday on Mississippi Insight. We know very little at this point about when the House and Senate Conference Committee on Medicaid Expansion might meet. But we know that on this front burner issue, both Senate President Delbert Hosemann and House Speaker Jason White would like those meetings to be held in public. Both leaders have selected their respective negotiating teams. Speaker White is sending House Medicaid Chairwoman Missy McGee, Public Health Chairman Sam Creekmore, and the previous Medicaid Chair Joey Hood. Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann appointed Senate Medicaid Chairman Kevin Blackwell, Blackwell's Vice Chair Nicole Boyd, and Bryce Wiggins, who chairs the Senate's Judiciary A Committee. They face the tall task of forging a compromise between very different proposals for expanding Medicaid coverage to tens of thousands of Mississippians working poor. As we wait for the conference talks to begin, advocacy groups continue to rally at the Capitol in support of Medicaid expansion. Last week, those groups included Care for Mississippi, the Mississippi Women's Economic Security Initiative, and the clergy group Together for Hope. Individual stakeholders also came to pressure lawmakers on expansion. One of them is Ken Alman. He works as a custodian at Southside Baptist Church in Jackson. He has a wife and two teen sons, and like thousands of Mississippians, they're hard pressed to navigate life in the coverage gap.
So essentially, even myself or my wife, anytime that we've been, in a situation where both of us were working or just one of us was working, we've never made over $2,000 a month take home. And so you get into these situations where benefits through the company are available, but it's a situation where, like I said about the semi-truck company, it's so expensive that it takes almost all of your money just to afford the insurance, and then you're left to figure out how to pay your rent, how to buy food and things of that nature, and it's just not possible. Excuse me, especially when you're already working 40 plus hours a week, you've got the kids, school, and everything else, all the ins and outs of running a family. You know what I mean? To take into consideration the option of working more hours somewhere else, isn't always available to you depending on what your family needs are. And so obviously things go undone. My wife, she's non-insulin diabetic. Thank God she's not insulin dependent. But that's something that we're not able to give her the proper treatment for. I've had existing dental issues since I was in my early 20s, and I'm 43 this year. And it just gets worse and worse as time goes by, and there's not really a lot of options for me out there without insurance. Personally, I don't want any government assistance. We don't do food stamps, we don't have housing or anything like that, but it's a situation where the cost of medical insurance, especially in this modern time, is so high that you can't live and still be able to provide what you need. And so it creates this situation where you're just constantly fighting to try to figure out how to do what you need to do in order to take care of your family and your kids, and there's no perfect answer. And I feel like the situation with the Medicaid expansion could provide those answers, if nothing else than temporarily, for those people that are in my situation that are working and doing the best that they can, and they don't necessarily want to live off of the government and take all the benefits that they would qualify for, but they need help in one specific area. And when you really think about it, outside of food and water, healthcare, the most vital of life's needs, the ability to take care of yourself and keep yourself healthy and alive, God only knows what would happen, if I was put in a situation where myself or a member of my family was facing some life-threatening thing, where the only thing standing in our way to save our lives was the ability to pay the bill. It's the kind of thing that keeps you up at night.
House and Senate negotiators will enter conference talks with widely different proposals for Medicaid expansion in hand. A new analysis offers a look at how these plans might impact Mississippi's health, our hospitals, and even state budgeting and the economy. Joining us via Zoom is Morgan Henderson. He is a research director in the Analytics and Research Unit at the Hilltop Institute, which authored that analysis. Morgan Henderson, welcome to Mississippi Insight.
Thank you very much, Byron.
Oh, Morgan, first explain to our viewers what the Hilltop Institute and why you conducted this detailed analysis.
Certainly. So Hilltop is a research center within the University of Maryland, Baltimore County campus. And we were commissioned by the Center for Mississippi Health Policy to conduct this analysis. We have a relationship with them. We've done some work with them in the past. And so they reached out to us a few years ago to get the ball rolling on this.
You've offered data projections in several key categories, including enrollment estimates, costs to the state, federal financial offsets. Let's examine the House's Healthy Mississippi Works plan first and remind us what the House is proposing here.
Yeah, so this is essentially a traditional Medicaid expansion up to 138% of the federal poverty limit with two key differences. The first difference is that this contains a prior coverage restriction. So as written, folks would not be able to leave employer-sponsored or private coverage and switch to Medicaid without waiting for 12 months. So that's a very unique feature. And additionally, it includes the option of a work requirement, but does not require that the work requirement be approved by CMS in order to go into effect.
And what about the Senate plan? How does it differ from the House's plan?
Yeah, so the Senate plan, it differs in a couple of key ways. So first, it would only cover folks up to 99% of their federal poverty limit threshold, whereas, again, the House plan would cover up to 138%. And the Senate plan does also include that work requirement, but not as an option, as mandatory, and it also has that prior coverage restriction.
There are plenty of differences, but you found one key similarity. Didn't you kind of talk about what you feel is a similarity between the two?
Yeah, so Hilltop, we conducted a Medicaid expansion study for Mississippi back in 2022. And so we updated that analysis to try to get a sense of what the impact of these two plans would be. So we do find that both, as proposed, would be revenue neutral, that the proposed funding mechanism would more than outweigh the costs of these plans. But there are a couple of key differences. So first of all, the House plan, if CMS accepts it, that would draw down the 90% federal match as opposed to Mississippi's traditional 77% federal match. So the House plan would lead to a lot more savings to the state than the Senate plan. And secondly, as part of the American Rescue Plan Act, states that hadn't expanded Medicaid yet were given an additional financial incentive to expand, which is tantamount to, in Mississippi, approximately $650 million. So the Senate plan would not qualify for this because it would not be traditional Medicaid expansion, whereas the House plan would.
Hilltop also offered a third expansion scenario in your analysis. Tell us about the market plus hybrid option. What's that all about?
So we wanted to include elements from both plans and try to just come up with a pro-market solution that would support and reinforce Mississippi's health system, including the state's marketplace exchange. And also we borrowed elements from Arkansas's plan, which successfully implemented this kind of thing about 10 years ago. So this Market Plus plan would cover folks up to 138% of the federal poverty limit, like in the House's plan. It would use a 3% tax on total capitation, like in the Senate's plan. It would include a work training program, just because work requirements have not been shown to be effective at actually increasing labor force participation, whereas a Montana-style workforce training program actually has been shown to increase labor force participation. And importantly, folks who are from 100 to 138% of the federal poverty line, they would receive coverage through the state's insurance marketplace instead of going onto Medicaid. And so they would preserve their existing coverage.
Is there a key point that you hope that the House and Senate negotiators will take away from this analysis?
I would say that the cost savings and cost offsets are real. The numbers are large, and that's frightening. I understand that. But Medicaid expansion, honestly, in any form, will likely save money in the long run. And the more folks that are covered, the more those savings will be.
What about the other states that have adopted Medicaid expansion? What has been the takeaway and a positive way from those states that have adopted Medicaid expansion, and maybe some of the drawbacks from that?
The results, the research indicates it's almost uniformly positive. People have more insurance coverage, people's health improve, people die less often, people suffer less medical bankruptcies, people suffer less foreclosures. Now there is some research to indicate that wait times at emergency rooms may rise a little bit. So that's just one of the negative consequences, but the tremendous body of research indicates almost uniformly positive impacts from Medicaid expansion.
You know, next week the negotiators will be working on maybe some kind of compromise proposal in the House and the Senate. I'm trying to get a prediction from you. What do you think might come out of it? What do you think the end result might be between the House and the Senate since they're trying to merge their plans together?
I think everyone wants to do what's best for Mississippi. I think everyone wants to do what's best to encourage labor force participation and really protect the working poor. So I wish I had a crystal ball. I can't really say, but I'm optimistic that both sides are going to come to a good compromise.
Morgan Henderson from Hilltop Institute, thank you for joining us and for your insight this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Monitor 12 News and WJTV.com for updates from the debate over Medicaid expansion. We'll be right back. A House bill that would have restored voting rights to nonviolent felons died in the Senate this year. But the topic remained in focus last week as lawmakers heard directly from convicted felons advocating for suffrage. The bipartisan measure passed the House overwhelmingly and would have granted suffrage 5 years after an individual's conviction date or their release. Kenneth Alman shared his personal story of disenfranchisement. He was released from federal prison 28 years ago and now works for the city of Jackson.
Like I said, I was incarcerated. I got locked up when I was 17. Came home when I was 23. I learned a lot during my incarceration. I matured during my incarceration. So when I re-entered the free world, I was pretty comfortable. I fought my way back amongst society, but my voting rights are my last piece of the puzzle. Because I'm tired of being a nobody. When you don't have a voting right, you don't have a voice, you're a nobody amongst society. So.
And so you were released when you were 23 years old, and how old are you now?
I'm 51.
Talk to me about what you've done in that time between, you said you have three children now?
Yes, entrepreneurship. I've done the personal care home where taking care of the mentally disabled. I did the lawn service, landscaping, and now I just work for the city of Jackson, Parks and Recreation.
Do you feel what you've done since you've been released is,
yeah,
standing up for character and all that?
There's some major accomplishments, but without the voting rights, it's not complete. It's not complete. I've served my time, I paid my debt, and I come home, I don't have voting rights, but yet and still I have to pay taxes. So those rights would be important.
Both of the pieces of legislation that would have restored voting rights have died this legislative session.
Right.
What was your reaction when you heard that? Are you hopeful that next year something can happen?
I'm hopeful, and the people that are making these decisions, if it were you, you would want these rights. You would have a different opinion if you were in my shoes. So,
Do you feel that voting rights now is something that people take for granted sometimes?
yeah, because they don't use them. A lot of people don't use them. Regardless of their reason, they don't use them. But like I say, the people that are against restoring our rights, if it were their children or them personally, they would see this our way. They would see it differently.
This year's House Action on Felony Suffrage was the first bill passed by either chamber in over a decade that would have restored voting rights. After the break, how a campaign finance law targets renewable energy companies and public service commissioners. It's Mississippi Insight only on 12 News. Public service commissioners and candidates for the office have long been barred from receiving money from water, phone, gas, and electricity companies. Now they'll have to cross wind and solar companies off the list as well. With the governor's signature of a new campaign finance law, commissioners and candidates for the office can no longer accept any campaign donations from renewable energy companies or their representatives. 12 News previously reported on questionable renewable energy donations accepted by all three previous public service commissioners in 2023, including former public service commissioner and Democratic gubernatorial nominee Brandon Presley. At the time, the accepted donations did not violate any PSC campaign finance law. Now, the donations accepted would be deemed illegal. We spoke with Senator Joel Carter, who introduced House Bill 1664 to the Senate.
So anybody that's regulating energy and it has a direct effect on ratepayers, we feel like there shouldn't be any outward influence on that. So when it comes to the Public Service Commission and the staff, we took the position that the ratepayers are directly affected by those decisions, and so those should be the people that are donating to those campaigns, not anyone that is producing or any type of utility.
What can you tell me about in researching and in getting ready for presentation and drafting of this bill? The PSC has pretty strict campaign finance regulations right now, but it seems kind of bizarre to me that it was renewable energy, wind and solar that was just off the books and created this loophole.
Yeah, so as you have seen, the current presidential administration, they've had a big green energy push, and personally, I think that it fits the portfolio of energy production. I think that the technology is not where it needs to be yet. But if you've got the investor-owned utilities that are not able to contribute to these political campaigns, anybody that's producing energy shouldn't be able to contribute to these political campaigns.
Sure. Can you talk to me about, I guess more broadly, the danger that these loopholes could create, even within a department such as the PSC that has pretty stringent?
Well, I mean, I don't have evidence to prove it, but I would say that net metering rule that was passed by the PSC, there was a lot of solar and wind and Sierra Club money that were donated to two of those commissioners that voted in favor of that. So, I mean, you can see it for what it is. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out, but I feel like that was some motivation. I don't think that the net metering rule is fair to ratepayers. I don't believe that if I choose not to have solar panels on my house, that I should have to subsidize someone else's. So that was one of the reasons behind the legislation as well.
Yeah. Other campaign finance bills died this year. Are you hoping to see more of a push for this kind of transparency?
Well, so the Office of Broadband, we just passed a bill today, and Office of Broadband, the director and employees of Beam are not allowed to accept any kind of donations or anything any kind of benefits, travel, or any other stuff with any internet service provider or any vendor that they do the contracts with. So, I mean, we're looking at all agencies. So it's not just directed towards the PSC alone.
Sure. And I know campaign finance has been lax here in the state. What can you tell me about the approach that's been taken this year? We have this PSC bill, we got the Bean bill, and there was effort on broad campaign finance.
I think when you look at the campaign finance laws, I think the biggest red flag, when you looked at the lieutenant governor's race last year, some of the dark money that they talked about, I think it's more directed towards reporting. Our campaign finance laws are pretty strict, so I think that's something that our side was definitely looking to address.
Can you break down for me, if you can, the specificities on who can donate now to PSC candidates and also members right now? I know there's the legal representation, there's some nuance in that.
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. The ratepayers. I mean, the ratepayers are going to be their future, people that can contribute to those campaigns. So, I mean, everyone else is off the table, essentially.
The penalties for violating this PSC campaign finance law remain the same. Those found guilty will be fined no less than $5,000, be sent to state prison for at least 1 year or both. And we'll be right back. We'll be back next weekend with more of the public and current affairs coverage that you demand. I'm Byron Brown from all of us here at 12 News. Make it a great weekend.